Hello, this is a lecture on Georgian ergative. So in this section, I will focus on very challenging issue, and this issue has been has been the source of several debates in syntactic literature. And this is Georgian ergative, ergativity alignment, how Georgian ergative is assigned in the structure, and things like follows. So the roadmap of our today's meeting will be as follows. I'll begin with the small introduction about ergative in Georgian. Then I will present some main assumptions of inherent and dependent case theory and give you the main ideas, main questions about which you can we can discuss later on in our meeting and give you some illustrative examples. At the end of the talk, I will give you related ideas for the research, for your further research, and we can see, and you can download one of the references list, which is quite big. Let's begin with the simple assumptions. These properties of the language are available in all Georgian grammars. So whatever grammar you take, you will find this information there. The first one is that Georgian is a morphologically ergative language. So it manifests itself on the marking of the nominals case marking, and not on the agreement patterns. And this ergativity you can see these markers on your screen now. Here we have, as you can see, though we have these markers with all nominals, it is constrained by person. So it's mostly available to the law and of the person hierarchy. The first person and second person doesn't second person singular and plural doesn't show morphological ergative marker. Georgian shows patterns of split ergativity, which is conditioned by tense and aspect. So it in the second series, thumb series of the Georgian so-called aorist series, it has ergative marking. So if verb has this imperfective past aspect, the subject is marked in nominative absolutive. But if the verb has this perfective aspect past tense, then the subject is marked with ergative. So the difference from nominative absolutive languages with ergative marking is that the subjects in perfective past tense, intransitive clauses, get this ergative marking, which is different from nominative absolutive languages but it's attested not only in Georgian, because cross-linguistically ergative can be found in many languages. And the next property of the Georgian ergative is the so-called argumentable structural property, and this is that it patterns together transitive subjects with anergative subjects and transitive objects with unaccusative subjects. Accusative case alignment shows that we have nominative for subjects in contrast to object, and we have ergative case alignment shows that we have ergative for transitive subjects and absolutive for intransitive subjects and for transitive objects. But Georgian shows split S alignment. There has been a big debate, and you can consult these references afterwards, between Harris and Hewitt about ergative alignment in Georgian. Thus, Hewitt supported the idea that Georgian has ergative case alignment, while Harris supported the idea that Georgian has split S alignment. You can see also references given in this on this slide to take more ideas and more information about argumental structural property of Georgian language. So I give you here now some illustrations to see where we can get this ergative, and that ergative is morphological in Georgian and not syntactic. The first example is this that you can see, Atsmagaitsina. in opposition to the sahligatpa. Atmagaitsina is an ergative verb, while sahligatpa is an accusative verb. So with sahligatpa we have internal argument, and subsequently we have nominative absolutive on the subject, and with with an ergative we have ergative argument, but we still don't see what we have second internal argument in the structure. And we can talk about this later on. The second example which I want to provide here is how do we know that Georgian ergative is morphological ergative and not syntactic ergative? How we can, okay, we say that it's the property of the language, but how can we check this? Now, this can be checked by different syntactic diagnostics, such as, for example, reflexivization, subjecthood diagnostic, argument omission, and so on and so on. The first one I present here is about argument omission incardination, which is possible only if the common arguments is the subject. So this is the property which is characteristic to the nominative, to the accusative nominative alignment. But this property is also characteristic to the Georgian. So they see that it is not syntactically ergative language, but morphological ergative. The only argument which can be omitted is subject and not object in the incardinated clauses. And you can see this from the example 3b, where Dedam Nahashvili da Otahidan Kavida. The argument which can be omitted is that of nominative. My students have conducted these tests to check whether Georgian ergative is Georgian shows syntactic ergativity, but this was in the for the teaching purposes. Of course, for the teaching purpose, for the practice, to see how we can check that argument omission incardination is possible only if we have the same if the same argument is a subject, and it does not depend on the morphological case. So if the second argument is the subject, whether it has nominative or ergative, it can be omitted. The next thing, the same, but you can see these examples of these tests later on. This is the ability to control the missing argument in subordinate adjunct clause. These are illustrations which you can see afterwards, and we can discuss that later on in the class. Here now I present several questions that arise. We have now the main idea of the properties of the Georgian ergative. One is that it's used with nominals. It's not indicated in the agreement, and ergativity manifests itself in subject. It's morphological ergativity, not syntactic ergativity. And it shows us split as alignment. So intransitive and ergative subject group with transitive subjects, and intransitive and accusative subjects group with object. So several questions arise that have been the subject of numerous studies on Georgian ergative. And these questions are as follows: how ergative is assigned? This is a question which is which is very challenging, and because Georgian ergative shows mixed properties, and on the question, for example, on the second question, is it structural or inherent? There can be very interesting views, because we can look at Georgian ergative from both points of view. It has mixed properties, so some properties can indicate that it's inherent, some properties may indicate that it's structural, and we have to find our solutions for these facts. And the next question is why an accusative intransitive subject patterns together with transitive object, while an ergative intransitive subject patterns together with transitive subject. So here we now see this inherent case theory and dependent case theory. So inherent case theory says that ergative is no structural case, and it's associated with theta position. It's mainly semantic case, but at the same time, it is assigned by little v to the external argument position, so it's associated with a theta role, and this theta role mostly is agent, mostly, but not always. And Georgian ergative shows examples when it is not an agent, but it's still consistent with the external argument. So it can be causer, it can be experiencer, it can be, for example, in object experiencer construction, Tigna Mama Siamovna, the book pleased me, the book can get ergative case. From one point of view, it looks like it's a theme argument, but it is not, it's causer, and it's still external argument in the structure. The next theory which deals with the ergative is the dependent case theory, and this dependent case theory shows that ergative is assigned to the higher dp when there are two dp's in the same domain. It depends whether you call it on the theory, whether you call it dp or mp. So, and the rule of the dependent case theory says if MP comments MP1 comments MP2 and both are contained in the same domain, then value the case feature of MP1 as ergative. This view shows that ergative is structural case and is associated with a position relative to another MP. So here the main idea is that Georgian ergative must have the second argument in the structure. And this second argument must have unmarked case, and this unmarked case is the dependent case theory has been proposed by Marans, by the way. And this and then developed further in Bobalik, and many other syntaxicians. So this is associated with a position relative to another MP. So if we see Georgian examples, we must have always transitive structure, transitive construction, to have ergative, following dependent case theory, to have ergative on the subject, in subject position. So Georgian ergative supports both theories, IC theory and DC theory. They are papers which indicate that Georgian ergative is inherent case, and they are papers which indicate that Georgian ergative is a dependent case. I adopt with you that Georgian ergative is best analyzed under the dependent case theory, and this is in line with what has been proposed by Marans and what has been analyzed in detail by Nash. Then the lower DP bears an unmarked case. So, Professorma Tsigni Tsaikitha. Professorma is ergative. We have this absolutive nominative Tsigni, which is unmarked case. And so ergative is assigned in the structure. But here we come to one very interesting issue and very interesting problem, and this is that a case, in a case, if we analyze Georgian ergative as a dependent case, what happens when with the verbs which do not have second argument in the structure? These are indirect transitive verbs without a second DP, which have only a DP dative goal argument, and these are anergative intransitive verbs, lacking a second DP whatsoever. I will focus just on anergatives today, but here you have one illustration of anergatives and for anergatives and for indirect transitives, so that you can compare the structures for both. Still, the structure which is proposed for anergatives, it looks like it is intransitive verb and it has not second argument in the structure. But is this really the case? Here the question comes, and here come a lot of controversial accounts. So, ergatives in Georgian assign ergative case, and this ergative case is assigned as Georgian is split, shows split ergativity patterns, is assigned in aorist forms. So these aorist forms either are regarded as perfective past or simply as past which lack a neutral aspect, which like an aspect. Perfective aspect, so which are neutral towards the aspect. This is assumption presented by Nash. So, ergatives are treated underlyingly as transitives in Georgian, and there are a lot of people who have underlined this. Schuhart, Hewitt, Nash, Melikishvili, and many others. Lazar, for example, treats them as anti-impersonal constructions and assumes that they have implicit cognate object. Hewitt also assumes that they have implicit cognate object. And there are a lot of people who think that ergatives must have implicit argument in the structure. I'm also in lines with this, and my claim is that ergatives do really involve covered object in the nominative absolutive. And I present several arguments to discuss this view, but that this have underlying transitive structure, and this is very visible from the formation of perfect tenses. They have agreement morphology, which indicates this implicit argument, and they have an ability to add a d hat as a residual of a dp with cognate object in absolutive nominative. And this is what hasn't been proposed so far, that this d hat can be indicated as internal as implicit argument in the structure. So this d hat is a quantifier Beveridge-Sota, many few, and Beveridge this quantifier Beveridge can be used as a direct object in Georgian, and this has been mentioned by many grammarians, and among others, Harris also mentions that Beveridge can be regarded as object in Georgian. My claim is that verbs, ergative verbs, which do not imply a theme argument, all ergative verbs can add this Beveridge-Sota to the structure. And this Beveridge-Sota we can see from 2 points. We can they may think that this is just the residual of the cognate object. For example, if we take the verb itsekva, Beveridge-Sekva, itsekva. But here with verb itsekva we have a real object in the structure, so the ergative verbs in Georgian have the possibility to transitivize. This is then they have overt object in the structure. But if we take, for example, itsina, Beveridge Sicily itsina. In this case, this Sicily, of course, is dropped. We don't see this, but we can say Beveridge itsina. And this Beveridge gets the marker we need to assign ergative to the structure. And this marker is absolutive nominative. How do we know that this is a marker of the absolutive nominative and not, let's say, it may be adverbial or something like this? But if we put it in the present tenses or future tenses, we see that there it's changed to dative accusative. So that means that we don't have problem with ergative verbs while assigning ergative case, because we really have transitive construction and we really have this nominative, absolutive, or unmarked case in the structure, which can be counted as a case competitor for the assigning ergative. So these are main points which we can present here. The main issues which are very interesting and which are very controversial and which are very challenging, and we can do a lot of research in from this point of view. Here, the ideas, my ideas my suggestion for our research would be to look for parallels in our ergative languages. And the good example from this point of view would be Basque language, for example, which has also ergative and which use also ergative with anergatives. Hindi also can be the example where it's used optionally, but with the Basque, it's more interesting because it has been claimed by Premier that Basque anergatives do not have implicit arguments, so there could be some controversial accounts. Now then, the other possibility is to provide a critical overview on studies presenting these controversial accounts uh, in the inherent case theory, based on inherent case theory and dependent case theory, and of course to provide a critical overview on studies presenting controversial accounts on anergatives. What do anergatives do in the structure? Because it can be that anergatives have implicit argument, but this argument is reflexive. It can be that this argument is cognate. It can be that this argument is a quantifier, as I claim. And the next thing is what also would be very interesting, to provide a formal analysis of how case assignment actually works in Georgian. So these are the main ideas what we can do with ergative from the viewpoint of dependent case theory and inherent case theory. Here are some references. You can see the references later on, but here I have two recommendations for further reading on ergativity, which would be a good start point. Here is the paper by Amy Rose Deal, which provides very detailed account cross-linguistically what ergative does. And what kind of ergativity can be, and how it can be analyzed from different perspectives, from morphological view, from syntactic view. The next reference is the Oxford Handbook of Ergativity. Here are two papers, also on Georgian language, and one of these papers is that of Nash, who discuss Georgian, who analyzes Georgian ergative as a dependent case. Thank you for your attention, and you can look these references afterwards. This was the lecture in the series of Blood Tech. Thanks.